Special witness, one with the let's say thank you. They have a nothing to tell us. Their closest, but application being king.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us here today. I'm Attorney General Formella, and we're here today to make an important announcement in a decades-old cold case. After nearly 50 years, we're announcing the resolution of the tragic and long unsolved murder of Judy Lord in Concord. We know this case has weighed heavily on her family, her friends, loved ones, all those who knew her, and the Concord community. And today, we're proud to say, but also solemnly say, that we can bring long-awaited closure to this case. Miss Lord was found murdered in her apartment on May 20th, 1975. She left behind a young son and countless questions. Early in this investigation, a suspect was identified, but flawed forensic science stalled the case. Specifically, a 1975 FBI hair analysis report incorrectly excluded what ultimately came to be our suspect and our perpetrator. This contradicted key physical evidence and other evidence at the time that made this individual a prime suspect. Today, thanks to advances in forensic science, unwavering dedication by the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit, the Concord Police Department, and many others, and modern DNA testing, we have definitively identified Ernest Theodore Gable as responsible for Miss Lord's death. If he were alive today, Mr. Gable would face first-degree murder charges. This is a case where there was no one piece of evidence, no one breakthrough that led us to closure. It was a number of things. It was persistence, unwavering dedication, advancement in DNA science, and also the evolution of other science that ended up being discredited. It was the combination of efforts of investigative teams across decades. No one person is responsible for this result today. It was truly a team effort, and it was a team effort that played out over many years. There's a lot of people to thank and acknowledge in this case. There's no way I can thank everybody, but I want to name at least a few. First, criminalist Roger Close, who's here today. I think he's the last surviving member of the 1975 forensic lab team. He assisted in collection at the crime scene and matched Mr. Gable's fingerprints to the front window at the scene of the crime. We want to thank Roger for all of his efforts. We have Sergeant Doug Wyman to thank. He's here today. He was there at the beginning. He even attended Judy's autopsy. Detective Chris DeAngelis, we want to thank today. He was a member of the 2015 investigative team. Sergeant James Moran is here today, part of the team. Deputy Chief John Thomas, Sergeant Wade Brown, and last but not least, our Deputy Chief Investigator Todd Flanagan here at the Department of Justice. Todd was instrumental in getting this case reopened in the early 2000s and making sure we took another look at it. And it's been many years, even since that reopening, that it took to get to the result today. Most importantly, I want to acknowledge the family and loved ones of Judy Lord. Some of them are here with us today, and I know this might be a moment of closure for you, but I know it's a sad moment as well. So we want to thank you for being here, and thank you for keeping Judy's story alive. We have Joanne Buck here, Judy's sister, Maria McKenna, Judy's niece, Mackenzie Young, Judy's great-granddaughter, Lee Young, Judy's niece, and Gregory Lord Jr., Judy's son, who is not here in person with us today, but is with us virtually. Thank you again to you guys for being here, and we hope today brings some long-awaited closure and some comfort. We know we can never bring Judy back, just like we can never bring any victim back, but it is our job to keep working to uncover the truth, to bring closure for these families, and where suspects are alive, to seek justice. This case demonstrates that no cold case is ever truly closed until we find the truth, and that time is only one impediment. Time is also an asset, because we will continue to work year after year, decade after decade, until we find the answers in these cases. Today is the closure of only one case, But this one case, I think, means everything to the family and friends of this victim, and we recognize that at the Department of Justice, that we have to keep working on these cases because these are real people, and behind these people are real families and real loved ones. Again, we hope today brings some closure to Judy's family and friends, and we know we can't undo the past, but we can keep searching for the truth. I'm now going to turn it over to Senior Assistant Attorney General Chris Knowles. He's the head of our cold case unit. He's going to walk you through a presentation of this case. We'll have a couple others who speak here today, including Chief Brad Osgood of the Concord Police Department, and then we'll take some questions.
Second. Microphone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here this afternoon for this important case. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment just to acknowledge the deep commitment and tireless work that has been put into this case by countless individuals over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Some of those individuals are with us today, and their commitment and their dedication is what has led to this resolution. So thank you. This case, the murder of Judith Lord, it spans generations. Generations of investigators, generations of detectives, attorneys, forensic analysts. And the resolution today is a testament to the perseverance shown by those individuals, the individuals at the Concord Police Department, at the Attorney General's office, and our specialized cold case unit. Their dedication and collaboration are the reasons we're able to stand here today and deliver the truth. Most importantly, we want to acknowledge the presence of Judy's family. We're honored to have Judy's family with us here today. Her siblings, a statement from her son, who was tragically just 20 months old when she was taken from our community. This long-awaited resolution is for them and for the entire Concord community. So we've called this briefing to announce the official and final resolution of a cold case homicide that's cast a shadow over our community of Concord for 5 decades. That's the brutal murder of Judy Lord. And today, after the confluence of dedicated investigative work and the power of modern forensic technology, we're definitively able to identify Judy's killer as Ernest Theodore Gable. And while Mr. Gable will not face prosecution as he died in 1987, the overwhelming evidence gathered to date allows us to officially close this case as solved. First, we must acknowledge Judy Lord herself. Judy was 22 years old. She was a vibrant member of our community, someone that connected people with her music.
What's that?
She's from a large family. She was the 11th of 14 children. And as that, she was a beloved sister, a new mother, and a new member of the Concord community. Judy Lord was found murdered in her apartment at the Concord Gardens Apartments on Tuesday, May 20th, 1975, at approximately 12:20 p.m. The discovery was made by her apartment manager, Joseph McVeigh, who entered the unit to collect overdue rent and because he'd heard a baby screaming for hours. And those persistent and distressing cries are what drew him to the apartment. He found Miss Lord deceased in her upstairs bedroom, and her young child was found unharmed in the crib in the adjoining room. She was murdered in her own home with her young child nearby. This is a view of the Concord Gardens apartment, and this box shows where Judy lived at the time of her murder. She lived in Building 19, Apartment 4. The scene police discovered bore witness to a violent and desperate struggle, centered entirely, or almost entirely, in the master bedroom of Judy's apartment. And as can be seen in the photos, the curtain in the bedroom was broken from the wall. The rod was broken as well. And most crucially, an alarm clock that was found in her bedroom had stopped because of falling and damage, which was consistent with reports of the time of what was heard from the scene. It had stopped at 1:47, providing a crucial timeline for the attack. Miss Lord was found naked, and evidence was immediately indicative of a sexual assault. The subsequent autopsy performed by Dr. Merritt Moon confirmed that the cause of Judy's death was homicidal strangulation. This is a photo of the apartment window, which would provide a crucial point of entry, a breach point into Miss Lord's home. Miss Lord had her apartment searched earlier that evening because of fears that she had, fears of individuals going into her home, so she had it searched, and the doors were locked. Yeah. And consistent with that report, when investigators responded to the scene, they arrived and found the doors locked. And as we'll discuss, this window was consistent with how the intruder, Ernest Gable, gained entry. And I want to discuss the forensic evidence that was collected in 1975. Investigators of the day meticulously collected all forensic evidence available at the time. The most critical items were the biological evidence. There were two towels as depicted in this photograph, a white towel and a purple towel. And those were found at the foot of Judy Lord's bed where she was murdered. And those towels had hardened stains consistent and which would later be determined to be seminal fluid. The towels were still damp, which is consistent with the timeline that we have of Judith Lord, that she had taken a shower. Neighbors heard her showering shortly before a violent assault and sounds of a struggle. And that dampness was consistent with those accounts of hearing Judy shower prior to the struggle. And because the seminal fluid was on top of the towels and the stains were hardened, it was consistent with that seminal fluid having been deposited after her shower. There was also trace evidence. There were 5 hairs, later confirmed to be of African American origin, which were recovered from Judy's body and her bed sheets. And those hairs were deposited in a manner consistent, or which indicated that Judy never arose after the assault, or after they were deposited. And the initial investigation into the murder of Judy Lord quickly and correctly focused on a suspect, Ms. Lord's next-door neighbor, Ernest Gable, who was 24 years old at the time. The evidence against Mr. Gable was compelling from the start. And this photo depicts Mr. Gable. The name Stansberry, as we'll discuss, was an alias that he assumed after the murder and as he transitioned across the country to California. So the evidence against Mr. Gable was compelling from the start. Mr. Gable had motive. Multiple witnesses, including Ms. Lord's own sister, told police that Judy was genuinely afraid of Mr. Gable, and that was due to his persistent and unwanted sexual advances. He'd appeared in her apartment just a week before the murder, while his wife was out of town, making sexual advances and making her uncomfortable. An associate of Gable's even reported him making remarks about getting a piece of that meat from Miss Lord. Mr. Gable also had opportunity. He lived in the adjoining apartment. He was dropped off at his residence after a night of drinking shortly before the sounds of a struggle, placing him at the scene shortly before neighbors reported hearing Judy scream, "Leave me alone," and the ensuing sounds that followed. The physical evidence collected further cemented Mr. Gable as a prime suspect in this case. 5 of Mr. Gable's fingerprints were found, recovered from the exterior of the window in a manner consistent with it being pushed open and someone forcing entry. Furthermore, the autopsy noted scratches to Miss Lord's face and neck, and investigators observed Mr. Gable had long fingernails, such that during one of his interviews, he took blood from picking himself. And he was perfectly capable of causing those marks. Conversely, her estranged husband, Greg Lord Sr., his fingernails were bitten down to almost the nub in a manner consistent with historical or habitual biting. Finally, the preliminary blood analysis showed that the seminal fluid, which was deposited on those towels, was from type B or type AB, a type B or type AB secretor, and Mr. Gable was determined to be a type B secretor. Now, this overwhelming circumstantial evidence led investigators to seek comparison of Mr. Gable's hair, of his blood, to the samples from the scene. But he refused to provide those samples. And that resistance led to a novel and precedent-setting court case, which resulted in him being compelled to provide his samples. Mr. Gable challenged a search warrant for his DNA, for samples of his hair, which was novel at the time. And that case was appealed, which made its way all the way up to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, whose opinion is pictured here. It depicts an individual named John Doe. That individual is Ernest Gable, and that was done to protect his identity as the active investigation was ongoing. And on December 3rd, 1975, the court ruled in the state's favor, and in this case, precedent was created, a legal landmark was set, and something that investigators do routinely every day in investigations, collect a sample, was made possible as part of the legacy of Judith Lord. It allows law enforcement to obtain biological samples. But there was a major forensic setback in this case, which led to the case going cold. The state won the legal battle, but then the investigation was derailed. Despite the fact that the Attorney General's office at the time filed a memo stating that it had probable cause to arrest Ernest Gable, to charge him, the samples that we discussed were sent to the FBI's forensic lab. And in December of 1975, the FBI issued a report in this case. And the report was using microscopic hair analysis, a technique that was then considered the gold standard. And that report incorrectly concluded that the 5 hairs that were found on top of Ms. Lord's body were microscopically different from Mr. Gable's, that he did not deposit those hairs. And that single flawed report contradicted fingerprints, his motive, his behavior, the compelling timeline that had been put together by investigators, and it was accepted as definitive truth that halted prosecution. It created an insurmountable barrier to the prosecution, and as a result, the case went cold. Then, in 2003, then Concord Police Detective Todd Flanagan reopens the investigation. And that led to the resubmission of evidence for modern-day DNA analysis. And the science was definitive. The New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory eventually, over the course of years, was able to confirm that the DNA profile obtained from the seminal fluid on those towels was a statistical match to Ernest Theodore Gable, with odds of 1 in 6.5 million. And that's 1 in 6.5 million within the African American population. The reality, however, is that the DNA match was, it couldn't overcome that flawed hair analysis from the FBI. And the lingering shadow of that flawed FBI report had created an insurmountable barrier. Now, the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit took a final and comprehensive review of this case, and to correct that critical piece of misinformation and finally link the DNA to the murder. The technique used at the time, that microscopic hair comparison, It was considered the gold standard in forensic science, with the FBI being the leading authority. That process involved looking at hairs under a microscope and comparing physical characteristics of the hair, such as the color, the texture, and the length, under a microscope to determine if they matched a suspect. And unlike DNA, microscopic hair analysis cannot definitively link hair to one individual. It's just not possible, and it's since been debunked. It can only determine that hairs could have come from certain classes, so class groups, race, origin. In Judith Lord's case, the FBI's report was definitive, concluding that the hairs found at the scene did not originate from Mr. Gable. And that authoritative but incorrect exclusion immediately derailed the entire case for decades. And despite all the compelling circumstantial evidence against him, the case went cold. The flaws in microscopic hair comparison have since been thoroughly revealed and acknowledged, and we're still learning about this area of science. But direct hair comparison is flawed, and it's no longer used by reputable agencies. Starting in around the 2015s, reviews by the National Research Center and others demonstrated that the technique was subjective and often lacked scientific basis. In fact, a major 2015 review by the Justice Department and the FBI itself found that the FBI analysts had overstated or provided erroneous testimony regarding microscopic hair analysis in more than 95% of the cases they reviewed where an analyst had to testify against a defendant.
How did that?
In those cases, that flawed analysis led to prosecutions. In this case, it led to exclusion of the perpetrator. We're still learning about this flawed science. However, the technique is no longer considered reliable for positive identification in criminal cases. In the Lord case, it took the Cold Case Unit's final review to formally discredit the 1975 FBI report, finally removing the decades-old hurdle that had obscured the truth. The final review team uncovered deeply disturbing patterns of sexual violence that directly correlated with the facts of Miss Lord's murder. As previously mentioned, former girlfriends detailed how Mr. Gable had forced non-consensual acts and how he would put a pillow over their heads during sex.
Sure.
Critically, he planned to kill one woman by putting a plastic bag over her head and strangling her, which is something that witnesses detailed. Mr. Gable's criminal history, as displayed on this picture, shows a history of burglary and a history of violence. The DNA match, combined with all of the circumstantial evidence in Mr. Gable's case, establishes a pattern of behavior, and it leaves no doubt as to the identity of the perpetrator.
This,
So based on the totality of the evidence, the irrefutable DNA, the fingerprints, the witness testimony, Mr. Gable's clear pattern of violence, the Attorney General's office has concluded that if Mr. Gable were alive today, he would be charged with first-degree murder for causing Miss Lord's death, before, after, or while engaged in the commission of, or while attempting to commit aggravated felonious sexual assault. Ernest Theodore Gable was 24 years old at the time of the murder. He escaped earthly justice, dying in Los Angeles, California on February 1st, 1987 from a stab wound while using the alias of Ernest Stansberry. While criminal charges cannot be brought, the case is now officially marked as closed and solved. Our final thoughts today are with Judith Lord. As I said, she was a daughter, she was a sister, she was a friend and a mother, and her life was stolen from her. We hope that this final resolution while nearly 50 years in the making, provides some measure of peace and the beginning of closure to Judy's family and to the entire Concord community. I'd now like to welcome Victim Witness Specialist Courtney Seralos to read a few statements by the family.
Hi, my name's Courtney. I'm an advocate here at the New Hampshire Attorney General's office. I first have an impact statement on behalf of Judy's family, written by her sister, Joanne. It reads, "On behalf of the family, in regards to the death of Judy Lord, we would like the public to know that in spite of it happening many years ago, it still has a negative impact on the family, especially myself. There are many words to express how this has made me feel anger at the loss of her future and the unknown of her future and what she could have become. Judy was a kind person who loved her son very much. She stated many times to me that she wanted him to have a good upbringing. I know that she would have been a great mother had she lived. She was an avid guitarist and lover of music, often playing her guitar anywhere she happened to be. We lost someone that can never be replaced." The next statement is from Judy's son, Gregory Stephen Lord Jr. It reads, "I don't remember my mother. I was young. I always keep her memory inside of my heart. She will always be with me. I'm told I look just like my mom, and I'm proud of that. I've been through a lot in my life, and in the dark times, I've always thought of my mom. I want to say thanks to my stepmom and dad. They have taught me right from wrong. I also want to thank Concord PD for their persistence in my mom's case, Detective Wade Brown and his colleagues. I recognize that this murder has ruined my mother's side of the family. We've been distraught for too long. My only hope is that this closure brings peace to my mother's family. I want my mother's sisters to find peace and closure amongst themselves. My hope is that there is no animosity among my mother's sisters. I found peace myself and a sense of closure. Closure to me doesn't mean I dismiss my mother or what happened to her. It gives me strength to move forward. Thank you."
Just please.
Now I'd like to welcome Concord Police Chief Bradley Osgood.
Today is a significant day for the city of Concord. For nearly 50 years, the murder of Judy Lord, has remained a heartbreaking chapter in our community's history, one that affected a family, unsettled the neighborhood, and stayed with generations of Concord police officers. It is a case residents still talk about, one neighbors ask about, and one that has lived in our city's collective memory for decades. While today's announcement cannot erase the pain Judy's family has endured, it allows the community to finally take a breath that it has been holding for a very long time. This case touched Concord in a deeply personal way. Judy was a young mother living in a neighborhood where people knew each other and looked out for one another. Her murder shook that sense of safety. For many in our community, it became a painful reminder that even a close-knit city like ours, tragedy can strike in ways that feel senseless and profoundly unfair. What today's resolution provides is not only justice for Judy, it provides clarity and truth for the people of Concord. To Judy's family, your strength and patience over these decades have been extraordinary. Concord has never forgotten Judy, and we hope today brings you some measure of peace. As we revisited this case, one thing became immediately clear. The original 1975 Concord police investigation was thorough and diligent. Those detectives followed the evidence and correctly identified Ernest Gable as a key suspect. Their efforts were hindered only by forensic limitations of the era, and most notably a flawed microscopic hair analysis that created doubt and delayed justice for decades. I want to recognize those who carried this case forward. In 2003, then Concord Police Detective Todd Flanagan, I'm right here, pushed to formally reopen this investigation. His efforts were instrumental in setting this new chapter in motion. I also want to acknowledge Concord Police Detective Sergeant Wade Brown, who has worked on this case since 2013. Wade re-examined every piece of evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and pursued every lead with determination. His dedication played a vital role in bringing us to today. Wade, thank you very much. I especially want to recognize the Concord police investigators from 1975 who are here today with us. James Moran, in the middle here, he was a sergeant at the time. Doug Wyman, to my right, he was also a sergeant at the time. And State of New Hampshire Forensics Lab Technician Roger Close is right here. And many others, dozens that were involved in this investigation over the past 50 years. Your careful work laid the foundation that made this resolution possible. Today's definitive scientific confirmation was born out of your solid and very thorough investigative work nearly a half century ago. This case stands as a testament to persistence, partnership, and the continuing advances in a forensic science. It shows that what can be achieved when generations of law enforcement remain committed to the pursuit of justice. To the people of Concord, this resolution reflects the kind of community we are, one that remembers its victims and never stops seeking answers. No matter how many years pass, we continue to pursue justice with the same determination shown throughout this investigation. Today, we honor Judy Lord and reaffirm that in this city, no victim is forgotten. Thank you.
Teacher.
I'll open it up to questions.
Could you discuss why the substantial material would outweigh all of the other evidence pointing to the person's irresponsible for this finding?
Sure. So in a prosecution, our criteria is beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the burden that we bear as the state. We had a report that said the person that deposited those hairs was not the person that we believed, based on all of the available evidence of the day, had deposited them. The FBI report derailed the active investigation by conclusively eliminating Mr. Gable as the depositor of those hairs. And as I mentioned, and as the report that you'll receive details, it's believed that those hairs were deposited by Judy Lord's killer. So while the racial classification, African American, is correct, the comparison direct hair to hair, that's flawed science.
The Attorney General's office has obviously put more resources into the cold case unit. This is 15 years on. How many cold cases are you guys actively looking into right now? And what do you tell families who have waited 50 years to get justice or good answers? Because that's,
So Judy Lord's closure, the resolution of this case, should be one of hope to not only our communities, but the victims and the family members, the loved ones of our cases. It should be one of hope. We have modern forensic technology which is advancing every day, but we also have the dedication, the determination of designated cold case investigators, attorneys, advocates that are looking at these cases. Each of our cases, we have 127, has an investigator assigned, has an advocate assigned. Those relationships with the family, those are ones that we encourage and maintain over the course of years or decades. Our investigators constantly re-examine our cases and determine whether there's new technology that can be applied that would advance the case. Our goal and the family's goal are the same. We want to give answers. We want to hold people accountable, and we want to give closure to families, the beginning of closure. We're in a position where we have the most robust cold case unit our state has ever seen.
And how many, do you have a number of how many cold cases you guys are working on right now?
127.
Are you aware of any other cases that have used the same debunked science, and will you prioritize those or take another look at those in light of this case?
So we've seen a number of cases that have this comparison, and yes, we're re-examining those, but again, we do that with all of our cases constantly. What new forensic technology or investigative technology can advance these cases? What wasn't capable in the past? In this case, I think the testament of the original investigators is that they collected DNA in a time when DNA wasn't a thing. They secured samples, they tested it, they did everything they could to advance this case and to bring closure. And but for that flawed DNA or flawed hair analysis, they weren't able to move forward. But that's what we've seen throughout the years is we have investigators who have moved cases forward in a positive direction. Maybe their generation won't be the ones that solve it, but their work is foundational in advancing a case and hopefully leading to justice.
And so the conclusion, I mean, the fingerprints were on the window, and the decision was made, well, it looks like his fingerprints were on the window, but we believe the hair sample was somebody else, so therefore.
Again, the hairs were believed to have been deposited. The evidence supports those hairs being deposited. The location of the hairs being deposited by the perpetrator, the person who sexually assaulted and murdered Judy Lord. We had a report that said it was not, those hairs were not deposited, or those hairs did not come from Ernest Gable. And so even in the face of that other evidence, the timeline, the victim, or the witness statements, the victim's statements to witnesses, we weren't able to move forward.
But since this science has been debunked, is there evidence that people have been wrongfully prosecuted and convicted based on that earlier evidence?
Yes, and as I mentioned, the FBI has initiated identifying those cases and responding to them. So the FBI has taken it upon themselves with the Justice Department to identify each of those cases where they've provided testimony or a report.
Can you talk about the forensic technology that was used to test the evidence again?
Sure. So DNA analysis, which wasn't a thing in 1975, has been utilized in this case several times. Evidence has been tested and retested, and then the fingerprint analysis. That was done in 1975, which linked Ernest Gable to the fingerprints that were deposited on Judith Lord's, the exterior of her window. Right. Any other questions for the media? Thank you all for being here.
That sheet. And please.